Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Purnamunsa Paripraj Kacharja Astotra Satushri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath. Sham Kund Radha Kunagiri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Gangamai ki jai. Jamunamai ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to you, some of the devotees. All glories to you, some of the devotees. All glories to you, some of the devotees. Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you, Maharaj. And thank you, well, everyone for coming to this Friday Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. Again, today's Friday, and it is a day later in Vrindavan. And we are reading in the 3rd canto, 15th chapter. And I think we're, wait, what text? We're in 62?
March 18th.
That's right, March 18th.
2023, or 17th in
17th in New York, East Coast of the US. Thank you.
Thank you, Tulsi Priya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tasmin Atitya Muniya Shadasajamana Aksha Samana Vayasavata Saptamayam Devavachakshata Grihita Gado Paradya Keyura Kundala Kirita Vidanka Vesho. After passing through the 6 entrances of Vaikuntha Puri, the Lord's residence, without feeling astonishment at all the decorations, they saw at the 7th gate 2 shining beings of the same age, armed with maces and adorned with most valuable jewelry, earrings, diamonds, helmets, garments, etc. Purport. The sages were so eager to see the Lord within Vaikuntha Puri that they did not care to see the transcendental decorations of the 6 gates which they passed by one after another. But at the 7th door, they found 2 doormen of the same age. The significance of the doormen being of the same age is that in the Vaikuntha planets, there's no old age. So one cannot distinguish who is older than whom. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha are decorated like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, with Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, conch, wheel, club, and lotus. Om Jnana Timirandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurn Militam Vina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Apitam Vena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Tadhati Shapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrashatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pradijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Shahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sude Devi Hanamami Puri Priye Vansha Goltarupyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here we find that the four sages, Sanak, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar, are visiting Vaikuntha. And Asad Shaman, they passed through the gates without being very much attracted. Their minds were on the Lord. So the decorations, the opulences, the grandeur of the gates and so on, didn't make much of an impression on them. That's the nature of love or of focus of the mind. When we're focused on something, we don't notice other things. Just we find people are focused on their computers, and their kids can be tugging on their saris or whatever, but they no, I just have to finish this email. They hardly notice because they're focused. Or someone is focused in reading a book or what have you. So the sages were focused on the personality of Godhead, and therefore they didn't notice, practically speaking, all the grand decorations of the first 6 gates, the Sajjhamana. In the material world also, if someone is focused in Krishna consciousness, then the material attractions just don't seem very important. That verse is there, that Smeram Pangi, my dear friend, don't go down to the Keshi Ghat. Why? Why shouldn't I go? Well, there's that boy named Govinda, and if you go and see him, he's standing so beautifully in the moonlight in his threefold bending form. And if you see him, you'll forget all about friends, society, friends, love. So don't go. Indirectly, that means that one is being advised to be attracted to the beautiful form of Govinda, so as not to be attracted, or with the result automatically that one will not be attracted by anything else. Samanavayaso, they were of the same age, and Srila Prabhupada points out that they were of the same age as one another, the two guards, because everyone's of the same age. There's no birth in the Vaikuntha. And the doormen were beautifully decorated with the same same features as Lord Vishnu. All right, any comments or questions here? And welcome to Mahesh Pandit. Nice to see you back. Are the maces and other weapons just decorations in Vaikuntha? Kendra asks. Well, they're more than decorations in the sense that they have a purpose. These are guards, after all. It's described in Srimad Bhagavatam that Lord Narayan has his army. There are those who serve as commanders in the Lord's army in Vaikuntha. So they have a function, but there's not much danger in Vaikuntha. No one can get in anyway. But we still see that even in the most well-fortified place, there may be guards or police who carry guns nonetheless, as not exactly a decoration, but this is part of their equipment. If you're a guard, you'll have a gun or a taser or whatever you might have. So the guards have that in Vaikuntha. And we'll see that they misuse them in the case of the Kumaras to block the sages from entering. I'm so more ceremonial, Kendra says. Yeah, I'm reminded of the Swiss guards who guard the Pope, but and they're largely ceremonial, they have their dress and so on, but from what I understand, they're also excellently trained in all the modern things that you need to be trained in to protect someone in these days. So yes, that's certainly part of the Aishwarya mood. And Tulsi Priya says a guard isn't a guard without his weapons. Yeah. The cowherd boys have their bugles and their cowherding sticks and so on. In one sense, you don't even need all these things because the cows can automatically be controlled. But on the other hand, these are equipment for devotional service. The sticks, the maces, all of this stuff. Okay. Mata Trirepa Vanamalikaya Nivita Vinyastaya Sita Chatushtaya Bahu Madhye Voktram Bruva Utilaya Sputanir Gamabhyam Roktekshane Shamanag Rabasam Tatana. The two doormen were garlanded with fresh flowers, which attracted intoxicated bees, and which were placed around their necks and between their 4 blue arms. From their arched eyebrows, discontented nostrils, and reddish eyes, they appeared somewhat agitated. Report. Their garlands attracted swarms of bees because they were garlands of fresh flowers. In the Vaikuntha world, everything is fresh, new, and transcendental. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha have bodies of bluish color and 4 hands like Narayan. So that's a feature of Vaikuntha. The garlands are not made of plastic flowers or old flowers picked up at the market. They're fresh and brilliant. And in our deity worship, as far as possible, everything should be fresh. Everything should be, yes, fresh and new. Then that creates the transcendental atmosphere. Prabhupada even preferred leaves to plastic flowers for decorating the deities. If there are no flowers, at least something natural, something real, but not these plastic flowers. Similarly, as far as possible for cooking for the deity, everything should be fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, things that are seasonal are mentioned in Nectar of Devotion. And even the spices, Prabhupada said, rather than use the packaged spices that one gets at the store, better to grind one's own spices so that they'll be fresh. In one sense, you can say, well, blah, blah, blah. But when we take this extra effort to use fresh spices, fresh everything, then that expresses devotion to the Lord, and it makes an offering of a superior quality. So these are some of the thoughts we can keep in mind about worshiping the deity. Everything of the highest quality we can provide, and the things prepared by the devotees are superior to the items purchased. The sages appeared somewhat agitated. They're from their features, their eyebrows were arched, their nostrils were flared, so they're ready for trouble, as it were. What are you doing here? That we'll see. Okay, there's a comment in the chat box. Saraswati, I'm wondering why the seventh gatekeepers, Jai and Vijay, are described here as having discontented nostrils, which I think means flared in anger and reddish eyes, which I think means annoyance. Surely the gatekeepers know that the other 6 gatekeepers allowed free admittance, and that other than pure devotees, no lesser impure devotees, impure beings, could ever gain entrance anyway. Or is it because there are no children at all existing in the Vaikuntha planets? And so these gatekeepers think the childlike Kumars are imposters. And we know there are children in Goloka. Well, the first thing is, as far as security protocols, the reason that you have a 7th gate is that the 7th gatekeepers are supposed to, again, challenge those who got through the first 6. If you have multiple layers of security, and after the first layer, everyone figures, well, they got through the first layer, everything's okay, or they got through 1 and 2, so we don't have to bother much here at 3. And then you have lax security. The idea is supposed to be that at each entrance point or at each layer, again, we put you through it. Those who've been through security where they check you twice on with the x-rays and all of that, know that they're being double sure, not that they just figured, well, they went through the first x-ray, everything must be fine. No, they double check. That means higher security. So it was the duty of the doorkeepers to be vigilant and not just assume that those who've gone through 6 gates are entitled to go through the 7th. As we'll find, there is no good reason for them to have challenged the Kumaras. We'll find out about that in the coming verses. Varyeteyor Nivivishur Mishator Krishtva Purvayata Purta Vajra Vapartikaya Svarvatra te Vishamaya Muniya Svadrishtya Ye Sancharancha Vihata Vigata Vishanka. The great sages, headed by Shanaka, had opened doors everywhere. They had no idea of ours, theirs. With open minds, they entered the seventh door out of their own will, just as they had passed through the 6 other doors, which were made of gold and diamonds. Purport. The great sages, namely Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar, although very old in years, maintained themselves eternally as small children. They were not at all duplicitous, and they entered the doors exactly as little children enter places without any idea of what it is to trespass. That is a child's nature. A child can enter any place, and no one checks him. Indeed, a child is generally welcome in his attempts to go places. But if it so happens that a child is checked from entering a door, he naturally becomes very sorry and angry. That is the nature of a child. In this case, the same thing happened. The childlike saintly personalities entered all the 6 doors of the palace, and no one checked them. Therefore, when they attempted to enter the 7th door and were forbidden by the doorman, who checked them with their sticks, they naturally became very angry and sorrowful. An ordinary child would cry, but because these were not ordinary children, they immediately made preparations to punish the doorman, for the doorman had committed a great offense. Even to this day, a saintly person is never checked from entering anyone's door in India. So this is, yes, the nature of children and sadhus. Sadhus expect to be able to go anywhere. And generally they are allowed to go anywhere. And they're not checked and treated like ordinary materialistic people. I remember one time I went through security at arrivals at an airport in, maybe it was Nigeria or Ghana, one of those places. And there was a guard there just before you left the security area of the airport. There was a guard there who was doing a final check of everyone's purses and carry bags and all of that. Big black fellow. And he was dutifully checking everyone. And then he got to me, and he was about to check me also. Then he said, "Are you a priest?" And I said, "Yeah." He just gave a big smile and waved me through. Gave a big smile and waved me through. So that's sadhu courtesy. Yes, that a saintly person should be given be treated differently from the ordinary people who are working on their own behalf for sense gratification. They should be, even, I remember another time I came into India and, well, maybe I won't say that, but it was another example of sadhu courtesy at the border. So this is the idea. The sadhu, because the sadhu's business is to go from place to place to enlighten people in the science of Krishna. And therefore, he's not to be checked. You can't go here, you can't go there. Particularly these security arrangements at residential buildings and so on are to the disadvantage of the residents when sadhus are blocked, when book distributors and others who are offering the message of Krishna are blocked by the security personnel. It's a misfortune for the residents who are thereby prevented from receiving the message of Krishna consciousness. From that point of view, the poor people are better off because they don't have those security arrangements and anyone can come and speak with them about Krishna. Okay. Saraswati says, other than Goloka, do children actually exist in the Vaikuntha planets? I haven't heard of any. I hope not. They create anxiety. In Vaikuntha, there's not supposed to be anxiety.
Maharaj,
Hmm.
it just
Yes.
occurred to me, that there's a gate in front of a planet. So I'm wondering how that works out. I mean, I can see a gate in front of a palace or something like that, but and it's a door that these children can open
I
themselves.
know the answer, but I don't want to compromise the security arrangements in Vaikuntha, so I'm not going to
Thank you.
disclose anything.
Thank you.
Anviksha vata rasanam chatura kumaran Vrithan dashartha layaso viditatma tattvan Tetrena chashkalayatam tadar nanstav Tejo vihasya bhagavat pratikula shila. The four boy sages who had nothing to cover their bodies but the atmosphere looked only 5 years old, even though they were the oldest of all living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. But when the porters, who happened to possess a disposition quite unpalatable to the Lord, saw the sages, they blocked their way with their staffs, despising their glories, although the sages did not deserve such treatment at their hands. Purport. The four sages were the firstborn sons of Brahma. Therefore, all other living entities, including Lord Shiva, are born later and are therefore younger than the four Kumaras. In the Bhagavad Gita, what is that? Chatvaro Manavastata. What's the beginning? It's in 10th chapter. At the beginning of the 10th chapter, say Maharshaya Saptapurve. Is that right? Maharshaya Saptapurve Chatvaro Manavastata Madjata Manasa Madwat Madbhava Manasa Jata Yesham Lokam Ima Puja. The Lord says that I'm the origin of all these progenitors and sages, the Maharshis, Saptapurve, the 7 ancient Maharshis, and Chatvara, the 4 Kumaras, and Manavas, the Manus. They're all born of me, and from them come the various living entities, of course, not from the Kumaras because they're eternally brahmacharis, but they're all mentioned here in the Bhagavad Gita. So the Kumaras come even before Lord Shiva. They're very the most ancient sages. But although they looked like 5-year-old boys and traveled naked, Kumaras were older than all other living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. Such saints were not to be forbidden to enter the kingdom of Vaikuntha. But by chance, the doorman objected to their entrance. This was not fitting. Hattadharmana. The Lord is always anxious to serve sages like the Kumaras. But in spite of knowing this fact, the doorman astonishingly and outrageously prohibited them from entering. We see how Krishna and Dwarka treated Sudama with the highest honor and respect. This is Krishna's mood, to honor the saintly persons, to respect the saintly persons. And here, the gatekeepers were acting in a manner contrary to the wishes of the Lord. The Vishwanath Chakravarti comments that the gatekeepers thought that the boys were proud because of their Brahma Gyan, and so they acted in this way. The Lord is friendly to the Brahmins. So the servants of the Lord should have also been friendly to the Brahmins. This is the nature of a servant. The servant should know the mood of the master. So the people that the master would want to keep out, he should keep out. Those he would want to let in, he should let in. He should be following the mood of the person that he's serving. The servants of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they shouldn't discriminate against anyone. They should liberally distribute Krishna consciousness without discrimination because they're serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that's his mood. So the sages were out of sync with the Lord's desires, and therefore they mistreated the Kumars. Vihasya, Teja Vihasya, disregarding the power and glories of the Kumars, thinking that that's one of the offenses, to think that the spiritual master is an ordinary person, to think that the Vaishnavas belong to a particular caste, here to think that the Kumars are just ordinary children. It was a grave error on the part of the doorkeepers. And Bhagavat Pratikula Shila. Therefore, they were acting against the nature of the Lord. Let's see. There's a comment. Lucy Priya, at this time and in this world, it seems we can no longer tell who's a sadhu, who's an enemy, just by their appearance. Yes, we can be fooled. Certainly there are those who pretend to be sadhus. But one has to be able to discriminate, especially the devotees tell who's a sadhu. Those who are engaged in Krishna consciousness, those who are chanting the holy name of Krishna, those who are engaged in the activities of devotional service, and not just those who are showing, who are dressed like Vaishnavas or who make a show of devotional service, but don't actually follow the regulative principles. especially one can tell a sadhu by how he speaks. That was found by Maharaj Raghunatha. He thought that this carrier of his palanquin, Jayadvaita, was just a clumsy oaf. But when he heard that clumsy oaf speak, then at once he understood, oh, he's a Paramahansa. I've made a great wonder. Even a fool can appear brilliant until he speaks. And even a brilliant Vaishnava may appear to be like a fool. But when we hear the message of Krishna spoken by the Vaishnava, or we hear the holy name chanted by the pure Vaishnava, then we can understand something. The Saraswati says it appears as if the gatekeepers acted out of pride and went on a power trip. Yeah, that's what happens when you have a position. You become, you can tend to become proud. Gurudas says we honor the four Kumaras as repositories of Vedic wisdom. At the same time, Prabhupada sometimes mentions and purports that one disadvantage of remaining in the material mode of goodness is that persons become unnecessarily proud of their intelligence. We know the four Kumaras are elevated, liberated souls. Yet, can one conclude there was this tinge of material goodness in them, that they got angry when blocked? Well, getting angry when blocked is not really a sign of goodness. That would normally be considered a sign of passion. But the position of the Kumaras is that they're liberated souls, as we said, they're repositories of Vedic knowledge. And they're described as being on the transcendental platform. We don't find that they're proud of their knowledge and so on. Second inquiry, the conclusion of this pastime is that the four Kumaras, who were following the path of impersonal liberation, become devotees of Krishna. That here in this verse, the reason for their irritability is their eagerness to see their Lord, Sri Krishna. Could it be said that the Kumaras possessed the spirit of devotion already, since they traveled to Vaikuntha just to get darshan of their Lord and Master? Yes, that could be said. It could also be said that even the impersonalists have to have some devotion. Otherwise, they can't make progress on the impersonal path either. But both things are there.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Gurudas Prabhu. Okay. Abhyam Mishatsva Vani Me Sheshu Nishiji. Abhyam Mishatsvanu. Sorry. Let's get this right. Abhyam Mishatsvani Misheshu Nishijyamana Svarhatamaya Pihade Patihara Pabhyam Uchu Surittama Jadrikshita Panga Ishat Amanujena Sahasa Taupa Utakshaha. When the Kumaras, although by far the fittest persons, were thus forbidden entrance by the two chief doorkeepers of Sri Hari, while other divinities looked on, their eyes suddenly turned red because of anger, due to their great eagerness to see their most beloved master, Sri Hari, the personality of Godhead. Purport: according to the Vedic system, a sannyasi, a person in the renounced order of life, is dressed in saffron-colored garments. This saffron dress is practically a passport for the mendicant and sannyasi to go anywhere. Sannyasi's duty is to enlighten people in Krishna consciousness. Those in the renounced order of life have no other business but preaching the glories and supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Vedic sociological conception is that a sannyasi should not be restricted. He is allowed to go anywhere and everywhere he wants, and he's not refused any gift he might demand from a household. The four Kumaras came to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. The word Suhritama, best of all friends, is important. As Lord Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, he is the best friend of all living entities. Suridam Sarvabhutanam. No one can be a greater well-wishing friend to any living entity than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is so kindly disposed toward everyone that in spite of our completely forgetting our relationship with the Supreme Lord, he comes himself, sometimes personally, as Lord Krishna appeared on this earth, and sometimes as his devotee, as did Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And sometimes he sends his bona fide devotees to reclaim all the fallen souls. Therefore, he is the greatest well-wishing friend of everyone, and the Kumaras wanted to see him. The doorkeepers should have known that the four sages had no other business, and therefore to restrict them from entering the palace was not apt. In this verse, it is figuratively stated that the younger brother of desire suddenly appeared in person when the sages were forbidden to see their most beloved personality of Godhead. The younger brother of desire is anger. If one's anger is not fulfilled, the younger brother, anger. If one's desire is not fulfilled, the younger brother, anger, follows. Here we can mark that even great saintly persons, like the Kumaras, were also angry. But they were not angry for their personal interests. They were angry because they were forbidden to enter the palace to see the personality of Godhead. Therefore, the theory that in the perfectional stage one should not have anger is not supported in this verse. Anger will continue even in the liberated stage. These four mendicant brothers, the Kumaras, were considered liberated persons, but still they were angry because they were restricted in their service to the Lord. The difference between the anger of an ordinary person and that of a liberated person is that an ordinary person becomes angry because his sense desires are not being fulfilled. Whereas a liberated person like the Kumaras becomes angry when restricted in the discharge of duties for serving Supreme Personality of Godhead. The question is answered about the anger of the Kumaras. It wasn't due to goodness, it wasn't due to passion. It was because they were restricted in devotional service. Kama, Krodha, Kamarpa, right? The Narottam Das Thakur, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that I'll engage these qualities in the service of the Lord. Even lust, even anger can be engaged in the service of Krishna. Prabhupada cites the example of Hanuman, who set fire to Lanka. So this was, Prabhupada said, a manifestation of anger. But the anger was in the service of Lord Ramchandra, and therefore it was accepted as transcendental. Otherwise, kama krodho vijayate. In the material sequence, one meditates on sense gratification. Then one wants to associate with the object of sense enjoyment, especially men and women want to get close. Then lust grows, and then so often lust turns to anger. The amorous couple become bitter enemies. The husband and wife divorce and fight in court over every stick of furniture. This because my senses are not satisfied. My senses are not satisfied, and it's your fault. It's your fault. I'll take you to court. So this is the material platform. Yes. Krishna Kamarpane Krodha Bhakta Dveshi Jane. Yes, I'll direct my anger against those who are envious of devotees. We saw that Prabhupada would become angry when Krishna was insulted, or when devotees were insulted or in some other way dishonored. Prabhupada would become angry. It's not that he was your cardboard cutout sadhu who always smiles no matter what. No. The devotee should become angry when the sadhus are, when the devotees or the Lord are disrespected. That's appropriate. The spiritual master can become angry at disciples just for their education. So anger has its place, but not the unrestricted anger of the materialists who have what's called the anger after frustration. That's one of the material qualities that we'll find later are born at the time of creation, anger after frustration. So not that kind of anger. It is anger after frustration, but the frustration is, I want to serve and you're blocking me. Let's see what else may be here. There's more in the purport. In the previous verse, it has been clearly mentioned that the Kumaras were liberated persons. Viditatma tattva means one who understands the truth of self-realization. One who does not understand the truth of self-realization is called ignorant. But one who understands the self, the super soul, super self, their interrelation, and activities in self-realization is called Viditatma tattva. Although the Kumaras were already liberated persons, they nevertheless became angry. This point is very important. Becoming liberated does not necessitate losing one's sensual activities. sense activities continue, even in the liberated stage. The difference is, however, that sense activities in liberation are accepted only in connection with Krishna consciousness, whereas sense activities in the conditioned stage are enacted for personal sense gratification. So going back and looking at the verse, the Kumars were the most fit persons, Stu Arhatama, and the personality of Godhead is Stu Rittama, the greatest friend of all living beings, Suridam Sarvabhutana. So the Vidrikshita Pange Ishad. Yes. All right, any comments here? Yes, there are. Saraswati, I'm reminded of Ravana, who took the garb of a sadhu to trick and abduct Sita Devi. And we know there's so many Pakantis. I recall Indra took on the garb of a sadhu to cheat other sadhus' wives. So it can be dangerous too for allowing free entry to sadhus sometimes. Therefore, one has to know who is actually a sadhu. These things are, Srila Prabhupada discusses in Nectar of Devotion. In the present age, someone dresses up in sadhu, sadhu dress, and he's accepted as a sadhu. But Prabhupada said our litmus test, as it were, is whether he's a devotee of Krishna. Otherwise, namam duskrita namudha prapadyante maya pratyajnana asura paramashra. Apart from that, even there may be impersonalists who are sadhus, but one has to see by their behavior what kind of sadhus they are. I know there's one prominent sadhu, more than one, who've been arrested by the government for illicit activities. There's another sadhu who was accepted as Bhagavan, but was reliably attested to have been a child molester, even though he's honored as a great sadhu by fools who can't tell the difference between cheap magic tricks and genuine saintliness. This is Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, just by dress, one pretends to be a sadhu and is accepted as a sadhu. Of course, it's a preliminary indication. If a person's dressed as a policeman, chances are he's a policeman. If someone's dressed as a sadhu, good chance that he's a sadhu. But sometimes the police are actually thieves. We know one incident in South Africa where the so-called police were actually thieves in disguise, literally thieves in disguise, not that they were corrupt policemen, they were thieves pretending to be policemen. Similarly, there may be rogues dressed as sadhus, but we should be careful. If the person's dressed as a sadhu, maybe he's actually a sadhu. But we shouldn't just be sentimental. That was the complaint against, or the comment about Draupadi, that sentimentally she accepted Ashwatthama as being a Brahmin, when his behavior was totally contrary to that of the Brahmin. So of course, yes. So a discriminating person has to be able to see And sometimes we get it wrong. That example is there that, who was it? Who went to see Pundarik Vijayanidhi? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, yes, if you want to know about advanced Krishna Katha, then you should go to Ramananda Roy. Then they thought that Ramananda Roy is, by seeing him, he appears to be a materialist. Similarly, Pundarik Vijayanidhi, Gadadhar Pandit, thought that this Pundarik Vijayanidhi, he looks like he's a materialist, like it's a sense enjoyer. But no, then it became clear that actually he was a great Vaishnava. Similarly, Ramananda Roy. So as they say, the looks can be deceiving, and therefore one should be careful not to commit offenses. One should be very careful not to commit offenses. But one should also be careful not to be a fool. Could it be argued, Tulsi Priya says, that the Kumar's anger was a symptom of childish pride? We are told, don't try to see Krishna, but act in such a way that Krishna sees you. How was simply wanting to see Krishna in the mood of service? Weren't they impersonalists whose minds were turned to devotion only after smelling the tulsi leaves on the Lord's lotus feet? They were saintly persons. They may not have perfectly understood Lord Narayana, but still they were eager to see him, just as an impersonalist may be eager to visit Vrindavan, may be eager to see the deity. He may still have not quite the right view, but we have to credit him. No, he wants to go to Vrindavan, he wants to see Krishna. Saraswati says, we know that devotees and Krishna's anger is as beneficial as his love. But here I'm not sure how the gatekeepers benefited from the Kumar's anger. That we'll find later, how they benefited. Or how they, how they got the opportunity to take part in pastimes for Krishna's pleasure. All right, we'll stop here and we can have kirtan.
Anybody? Mahesh Pandit Prabhu, would you like?
No problem. Please.
All right. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnuvad Paramahamsa Paripurajaka Ashto Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamana Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna,
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Both Namaste.
Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Please share the class links with your friends, and I hope we can all see you again on Monday for the Srimad Bhagavatam class. This is Jayadvaita Swami. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And Jayadvaita Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
We had
Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
this morning, Gaur Sundar Prabhu, the disciple of Srila Prabhupada, passed from this world here in the New Ramanrati community. I thought I should mention. Up until his passing, they were hosting regular Wednesday kirtan programs, and so I believe he was the first servant of Srila Prabhupada, the first person who was engaged like that. Someone was saying, anyway, in their brief eulogy.
First secretary.
Secretary, servant, right? Secretary, servant. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Gurudev. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Panchatattva.
Hare Krishna.
Gaurasundar tied my initiation beads around my neck.
Wow. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Thank you, Tulsi Priya, Shraddha, Panchatattva, Mahesh Pandit.
Hi, Maharaj.
Jai Mahesh Pandit Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Good to see you back. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Tara, Doug, Nina, Ellen, thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
And Gurudas Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Krishna.
Hare Hare.